So good morning, everyone. Today is the July 13th, and it's our weekly SIG Node. And last week we canceled, so we have the 2 weeks updates. And thanks everyone's effort. So we have the branch card and everything. I personally think it's pretty smooth this time, and a lot of things get merged. And I know we have some left. And Elana, I also see your exceptional request there. So maybe let's start today's meeting. And Sergey and Elana, do you want to update our regular PR status and also the bug triage, issue triage status here?
Yeah, I can do that. Do we also want to talk about KEPs first, PRs and bugs first?
I think we can discuss KEPs retrospective maybe next time, so we know the status of exception requests, and we can just go through the list that was accepted for the milestone and discuss maybe the reason why it didn't make it or made it through. So
yeah, that sounds great to me. Because I think there are some still pending. So yeah, KEPs next time, and then in terms of PR, so in terms of the board, I think everything that had the milestone has been either looked at or merged, and so everything else right now, I think on the board, like there was one remaining thing that I was like, oh, Renal, can you please look at this? And I'm pretty sure that one got merged now. So other than I think some of the stuff that got an exception request approved, everything else is good for this milestone. I haven't started looking at some of the burned down stuff, but last I checked, it was all pretty close. There is one thing with, I think, the pod lifecycle refactoring. I found a small bug in where in certain circumstances there was an NPE, so Clayton's looking at that. But I think we're doing pretty well, and for CI sort of burned down, we're definitely doing really well this release. So yeah, not too much going on now that we've hit code freeze, which is good. Maybe everybody can just take kind of a chill July and get it all done.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you missed what's going on in terms of PRs, just go through the links and you can check out what was closed, what was merged. So it's very interesting to watch what people are doing, people working on.
And also, surprisingly, this time, actually, I know there's the still failure and the E2E test failure, but compared to the last couple releases, I think this time actually is pretty smooth. And also in the past, a lot of time it is, cross the finger. So far, at least it's not the block a lot of the change being merged, right? So approve the change being merged. So far it's pretty good. So that's why I think about it smooth this time. So let's move to the first topic. Swati, do you want to?
Yeah. Hi everyone. So this came up in the SIG Node CI meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we've been finding a little challenging finding reviewers for areas related to container manager and all the resource managers, as well as pod resource API. So I just wanted to bring this up. Kevin has been extremely helpful in this area, and this became even more evident because he was out on paternity leave, and I think he was working through his annual leave to help us with the reviews. So I think it's probably not the best place to be as a community, relying on just one person. So my question here was, like, we're all pretty familiar with requirements in terms of being a kubelet approver, or sorry, kubelet reviewer. I was wondering if there is a way that you could maybe propose yourself as a reviewer for a subsystem, and that probably might help with this.
Maybe other people, please feel free to chime in. But I want to share one thing. This is aligned with last meeting we have. I think Elana brought up approval status, and behind the scene, and actually the Derek and I, we talk about. We think about today. It is the SIG Node approval. It is to coarse grain. It's not finding grain, like exactly what you say. when we first build a SIG node, I want to share with here because a lot of people is new here. Actually, we are on purpose to build a sub area, mini sub area. This is also I share with that new GK node team in Google. So we build a sub area. If you look at the SIG node responsibility, there's basically have the 5 area we build initially. So there's the pod lifecycle management, for example, for Kubernetes, PLEG, and the CRI, all those kind of things. If you talk to Manu and also Lantao Liu in the past, they are actually responsible for those kind of things. And then we have like the resource management. In the past, the resource management, we have the Vishnu, Derek, and myself, and also Jain, David Dashpool later. So all those people we on that area. Then there's the monitoring, logging, and there's the many people, and there's the node security, like a team or Claire. So you can see that also even storage. So you can see that today's storage chair start actually originally is the signals, and then later found the storage. Same thing for like the team or Claire used to be signaled in charge about the node security, but later become the SIG-Auth chair at the tech lead. So there's same thing kind of keep going like that way, but over time, it's kind of like we are lose those boundaries, and also a lot of people move and to the different area. So that's kind of the today's problem. So Derek and I, unfortunately, Derek is on vacation. We're supposed to have the meeting and discuss with the existing approver and figure out how to. I also talked to the Clayton and about how to make a previous sub area, not clearly defined sub area, but we do. Actually, at least that's kind of goal when I first founded the Signal, and we want to build a different area. So maybe it's different because today we already have the SIG-Auth, right? So we don't need node security, but we need some people review security perspective on the node side, like for example, user namespace. SIG-Auth will. So there's many of those things unclear over time, and the people join the different SIG and lose and also some people also even like leave this community. So that's why we need to rebuild the community and with a little bit of a structure. So this is a really good question and a good time. And yeah, we understand that today problem. So we really want to have like build a more finer granularity, the structure, reviewer structure, approval structure, and have like the small sub community so people feel they support each other. And so I don't have an answer, but that's kind of I want to share, hopefully, initially how we did. And I do see that we lose the reviewer, like a lot of area become to single point failure, right? And the sole responsibility. This is kind of problem today. Yeah, please feel free to chime in, people, and how do they feel? And once Derek is come back, we will discuss and more detail and to figure out. And feel free also to chime in, say how we build the structure, how to gain the knowledge, how to get help from the community on different area. Yeah.
That sounds good, Don. Like even if we can define like high level, like you mentioned, the different subsystems per se, and maybe people can volunteer in the areas they are interested, that might be helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, specifically for this area for CPU manager, I think from Google, Ruben will be taking a look at PRs. I will start mentioning him more and more. But I mean, it doesn't mean that we will have reviewer immediately, but at least we'll have more attention to this area.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Sergey. Thanks, Don.
Sorry, I couldn't immediately answer your question, but we are going to. This is a good timing, and we are going to discuss, and make this more explicitly, and to help the community.
Yeah, that's okay. Like I wasn't expecting an answer per se, but it's something that we need to think about and take action on this. Yeah. That's fine. Thanks, Don.
Yeah. So Vinay, do you want to share the status about the VPA?
Yes. I think we pushed really hard for 1.2.2, but my bad, it came in quite late at the end. My own schedule slipped a little bit to start because I was distracted with the COVID situation in India, so it started from there. But I think it's better to take this in 1.2.3, given that we have some feedback that I think a couple of major areas that a rework that needs to be done is in the API pod status, how we are reporting it, where we are converting it, and more importantly, when we get the container status back from the CRI, we're converting it over there. And initially that seemed convenient and there were reasons to do that. But as I was going through a second pass of the code last week, I discovered another area that needs to be addressed. I've taken care of update container resources for both Windows and Linux, but on the return path, I didn't do that. So there is really good reason why Lantao's feedback makes a lot of sense here. So I'm going to work on that now that we have more time. I'm going to work on it and do it right. But I'm hoping to see if we can get this in early in 1.23 whenever the branch opens for check-in. Is it going to be like early August, or what is it generally? Do we know? Can you hear me? Hello?
No, we can hear you.
I'm counting
okay.
months.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was just wondering.
I'm counting months in my head.
Okay. I was just wondering what target time frame we should shoot for. I'm thinking like early to mid-August is a good time frame to get this in. The branch should be open, and we're already pretty hot. I think Lantao is engaged, and I don't want to lose momentum, but I think it's important to do it right. And Elana also mentioned that there were some reviewers that not all the reviewers are on there, and I wanted to identify and loop them in if there's anybody missing. As far as I know, Tim has approved it and he likes it, and there are a few comments that might come from Abdullah or sig-scheduling. They were looking at it. It's a very small change there, but ask them to take a look at the broader perspective to get input from there.
Yeah, so Tim is just the API reviewer, so he doesn't have like final sign off on the whole thing. So the things that I flagged, there were 3 things that I was concerned about when I did the review. So the first thing was that nobody from who works on package kubelet CM had reviewed the changes there, and they were pretty substantial. The second concern was that there were changes made to the container status lifecycle that caused things that were supposed to be purely transformative functions to be mutating data. So they were no longer thread safe. So that was a problem. And the third thing was that there were no end-to-end tests, and those need to be in place for alpha. They don't have to be periodics, but you have to have some end-to-end tests. So given all of those things, unfortunately, I think the work in progress only got pulled off of that PR like a week before code freeze. I think we could have resolved all of those things for this release if that was ready for review like a month before the deadline. But because that wasn't the case, people didn't get a chance to look at it early enough, so we couldn't catch that stuff early enough, and so that's why it slipped.
Yeah, and that's okay. And I think I've asked Chen Wang to work with you on the tests, E2E tests, how to get them running. So she's gonna reach out to you. We'll take care of that. And regarding the container where we convert, we had to-dos on that. Lantao flagged them down, and I figured, okay, since the feature is going to be disabled, we can work through it during beta. But now that we have time, we'll just get it. I was uncomfortable with the level of change that was there because this one has been pretty well tested in the previous iteration of the design. A lot of the code that David Ashmore looked at has remained the same. So when we wanted to change this just before, so close to the code freeze, I was getting uncomfortable with it. But this is the right decision to put it in early in the next release so that we get a lot of bake time. And there are quite a few people who are looking to try this out. So we'll have no shortage of hands, exposing issues, potential issues, finding them early, even before it becomes official alpha.
Yeah, it's just got to be fully baked. I think the only issue was that the reviews got so compressed that any changes that needed to happen. There just wasn't time to make them. So.
Yeah, well, I think we have a few weeks now, and I'm gonna try and I have some other things to attend to as well, but I'll try to keep some momentum on this and address the key concerns that we have for the tests. I think Wang Chen from Red Hat will reach out to you. She's working on it, so if
Yeah,
she needs some
she's on
help.
my team, so
okay.
yeah, I can chat with her
Perfect.
for test
Yeah.
infra changes. Like I'm not the only one who can review those. We have an entire group, and in fact, I can't even approve those. So I'm just a reviewer. So yeah, if you're more curious about that sort of thing, or you want to add it as a topic to our CI subgroup agenda, that's a thing you could do as well.
Yeah, I'm going to try and get involved as much as possible. There are a lot of work that I've left to finish this out, so I want to catch up with that as well and come back to this. Okay.
So,
yeah, Vinay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Vinay, in terms of the implementation, just because we have some more time, I just want to make sure that we fix two issues. One is the status part. Today, the problem is that after the container is updated, there's no signal sending back to Kubernetes, so that the PLEG doesn't know that they need to refresh cache. So since now we have time, we may want to spend some time thinking about how to solve that problem. So the other one is it was marked as to do because the time frame is too tight. But now because we have time, maybe we also want to address that is the how to handle the resize retry, because today it's done by each pod worker and we need to introduce a big log within Kubernetes to handle it. So now we have time, maybe we can look into how to let the sync loop to handle the retry instead of each pod worker. Yeah. So because now we have time, maybe we have some more time to discuss that to properly implement those two things.
Yeah, let's do that. And I don't know if you want to reconsider the idea of when pods depart the node, then we retry, because that I feel is a smart way to do things. Because if you retry when everything is stable, then the retry answer is going to come back the same as nothing has changed. Why are you asking again? But if a pod leaves, a pod that consumes resource leaves, then you have a better shot at getting the retry saying, yes, you're good.
Yeah, but I think in Kubernetes, usually what we do is to use the periodical cleanup to handle to make sure to reconcile all the state and make sure they are in the right state. Because if you make it even triggered, maybe the event never comes, and we don't get the chance to do the thing. So usually we have even triggered update, but we also have the backend periodical cleanup or sync to sync the state. So to me, I feel like the resize thing may if we cannot fit it in the first place, maybe we can do it. But yeah, I think we can discuss more. Either it's when even triggered or periodical sync. But to me, I feel like it's probably better to do periodical sync. Seems more reliable to me.
Yeah, periodical sync will work. Event triggered is it's not a or, it's more like a and. So we can have event triggered at a later point if we see that when pods leave and some other pod comes in and takes what was supposed to be the resource. It shouldn't happen now because we're using the max. In the previous iteration of the design, we were not doing that. So once a pod cleared out, a new pod could be admitted, while a pod that's pending resize hasn't gotten what it needs just because it's waiting on the period and it's not the right timing. But now we are using scheduler max of the two, and that has its downsides, but let's go with what it does and see if that works. Another change that I think that'll help us is and this is I wanted to mention this. Tim, I think, has been working with the API machinery guys to see if we can get the status as something we can rely on as a persisted guarantee from the store. And it's that KEP is all in but name approved. So one thing that we are doing in Kubelet is we do this unwieldy get pod QoS computation every time we want to see which class it belongs to. This is a tangential change independent of this feature. What we should do is look at replacing that with, or that function essentially becomes once the pod is bootstrapped, the QoS class is on the pod status. Just rely on that. Alternative is to use our pod structure, C group structure, to get that information. But I think we can rely on the pod QoS class in the pod status. This can be a separate, like a, I don't think it deserves to be a kept, can be a bug fix. We can drive that. Just to get everyone's attention on this one. That's a potential thing we could do. Kubernetes has a change, has a few places where this change is important, and then there is one change in, I think, somewhere in the quota handling, resource quota, that relies on it. But yeah, this came up because I had a change in validation which says if you're trying to adjust the limits so that your pod looks like a guaranteed class when you're initially created as a burstable, then we don't allow it. Did I confuse everyone with this? Okay. I can put something in a slide or something and bring it up next time.
So, so really sorry, I lost when you say another tab, and there's some distraction. And so, but please put that link if you have already have the tab there, and put the link. And also, I noticed that you mentioned that SIG scheduling will review, and please also come back to update that review status if there's any decision made yet. And one thing also, what you are mentioning some like the missing reviewers. So what do you mean the missing reviewer? I think we already have enough reviewer for your PR. And
that came from, sorry, that was Elana mentioned that not enough reviewers. So I was wondering, who are we missing?
It wasn't so much not sufficient reviewers as there were certain reviewers that needed to be engaged that were not. So for example, like there was nobody from package kubelet CM who had taken a look at those changes. And so like we probably want the folks maintaining that code to look at those changes. Like we talked earlier in the meeting about like folks who want to become just reviewers or approvers of that subcomponent. So no one from that group who's focused on that code had reviewed your changes. So I'm suggesting that at least one of those people could have looked at those changes.
Yes. But before we got that one, actually, at least Derek and I on that PR, both we are the package CM's the reviewer and approver. So that's why this is why we ask. Originally, we missing off the API reviewer. So this is why I asked the team hacking help, and also we missing some of the resource management reviewer. So this is the David Dashpool, and jump into help even more. But right now he's so busy, so that's why he cannot help. But at least that part is being reviewed, and also Derek and I actually review the design. The reason right now this cannot merge is just because API change came from the team hacking, because we in the past we agree about the API. Actually, API approver approved the previous API, but the new change actually cause a lot of implementation, and which it is cost about the CRI level of the change. This is why I ask Lantao help, and especially related to the PLEG and the pod lifecycle, because Lantao have the most experience here. And so I thought that we cover most things, and Manu also, I believe, is also take a look in the past. So that's why I kind of like wondering what it is review we lead it and missing, and have to be
I just didn't see any comments from folks looking at that code specifically. Like I saw, for example, Lantao's comments. I also commented on some of the pod lifecycle stuff, but like there was effectively like nothing saying, yeah, looks good, or like, no, these changes need to be made. So I wasn't sure if it had gotten looked at because the PR had only gone to reviewable like a week before the deadline. So it's not a lot of time for turnaround.
Yes.
So that was all I was
I totally agree. Yeah. Yes, thanks for this one. So I totally agree, because I don't think the PI is ready, and this is why I comment before today's meeting, because I know the relay is asked is go or no go for data 22, and then I think about it's not the go because it's not ready. Like I comment before this meeting, and But I want to make sure we have enough of the reviewer included in that one, and make sure we next release we got enough attention, and because this is the big change.
Yeah.
I worry about this is destabilize our system, but at the same time, this is important feature, and so how to balance those kind of things. And also the Clayton recently have the PLEG big enhancement, and I think Vinay, you need a rebase, and you need the bigger rebase there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it. Yeah, that go no go was for last Tuesday. Thursday was the deadline, so I was trying to see if there's enough confidence. I myself was feeling more towards no go after the changes that I made over the long weekend, but now we have time. We'll just do it right.
Yes, yes. Actually, the last week, and Lantao and I discussed. So we do think about this is not ready, and so.
Okay. Thank you.
So let's move to next topic. And Balaji, do you want to talk?
Yeah, sure. So is it possible for me to share the screen?
Yes, yes. Let me find I try to find you find. Oh yeah, got.
Okay, cool. Let me try.
Please go ahead.
Cool. Can you see my screen now? Cool. So, so we discussed. So I had a kept earlier like to add a out of tree pluggable stuff to the pod admit handler, but we decided not to go down that path because SIG API missionary, they came up with something to add on the control plane side where user cannot delete a webhook, and that kind of like mitigated the risk that we called out. But we recently learned that SIG API missionary has dropped that plan of adding a manifest based webhook due to some concerns that they had with respect to the Kubernetes admin permissions being mishandled because of that manifest based webhook. So instead, so they dropped that plan, and then they are working on like a different approach to see how to mitigate that. So that's why I wanted to reopen this KEP on adding this out of tree plugin for pod admit handler, and then bring it up here to see like what you think, and then decide whether we wanted to go down this path or not. So I have like quick 3 slides to cover like our use case, because we didn't go deeper in the last meeting. So I wanted to just go over this and then have some feedback from you all to see if we wanted to go down this path or not. Does that make sense? Cool.
Yes, makes sense to us. Next.
So yeah, so just to set some context here, like at AWS, we support like different types of managed node groups. And one of the node group, we call it as Fargate node group. And in this Fargate node group, this is more like a serverless node. Like we run the nodes on our side. So our customers don't actually see the worker nodes. And for this Fargate worker nodes, there are only like a few types of workloads that we support. And there are like few components that we run on the node as well, like that we don't want customer to get access to. So in order to like make sure that we don't run pods that does not work on the Fargate worker nodes, today what we do is like we have a validation webhook, and that validation webhook validates all the fields. And if some of the fields are not supported for our worker node type, like it just rejects the request. But there are also cases where like customer, they delete these validation webhook but still like have their own pods to be like running on our Fargate worker nodes. So in order to like prevent this from customer directly like attaching their pods to run on our Fargate worker nodes, we evaluated bunch of options that are already available. So one of the option we evaluated is adding taints to the nodes, but customer can tolerate a pod with any taints and still have their pods to be scheduled on this Fargate worker nodes. Another one we tried was to have a PSPs, but same like validation a webhook, cluster admins can go and delete those PSPs or validation of webhook and then still have their pod scheduled onto this Fargate worker node. So when we were evaluating other options that can best fit our use case, what we found is the pod admit handlers that we have in Kubelet. So just to set some context for like people who might not be aware of this pod admit handlers. So in kubelet, there are like different set of handlers, and one is called as a soft admit handler and another is called a hard admit handler. So when kubelet gets a pod, what it does is like it invokes all these handlers to verify if it can actually run the pod or not. And when it invokes the hard admit handler, when one of these handlers says that, okay, this pod cannot be executed, then it just moves the pod to a terminal state. And when one of the admit handlers under a soft admit handler says that this cannot admit the pod, then the pod stays in the pending state, but with an error message saying why this pod cannot run on this particular kubelet. And what we thought is like it might be better for us to add another handler over here, which kind of like validate whatever we wanted to validate. Therefore, like even if customer deletes the validation webhook, or even if they have a pod which can tolerate any taint, but when the kubelet gets the pod, it will call this soft admit handler, and then it will call our admit handler, and this will say whether to actually run the pod or not. And yeah, obviously adding the code specific to AWS worker node here doesn't make sense. So what we did was like we added a interface which actually calls out another binary on the host, and that kind of returns whether to admit the pod or not. And we thought like this particular use case might be applicable for other cloud providers as well as for other use cases as well, because today some of the admit handlers, what they do is they check for the Docker version or the kernel versions to see if the particular Docker has these functionalities. For example, there's no new privileges or the process mount, and then admits the pod and then decides to whether to admit the pod or not. And we thought like using external process might be helpful for other use cases as well. And that's why we wanted to propose this idea and see what everybody thinks. So we have like few suggestions on the way that we can start admit handler and the way we designed it inside. So we had like 3 different plugin types. One is a shell based one, which is similar to the CNI networking model that kubelet interacts with. Another one is the gRPC or a Unix socket. Unix socket is similar to how the CSI or the EBS drivers or the CSI drivers are implemented, and we can also have a gRPC based model as well. So before we like go into like how we wanted these configurations, so we wanted to like hear from you all, like whether this makes sense to add in the soft admit handler, or if there is anything else that's available for us to prevent this.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I just had a quick question on that. Did a mutating webhook not work to, fix up the pod before it even gets to the scheduler?
Yeah, so the thing is like in AWS, like customers, whoever creates cluster, they get the admin access. So they can go delete those mutating webhook configuration or validating webhook configurations. So that's why like SIG API missionary, what they came up with was with to add some sort of like a static manifest based webhook, which cannot be deleted by the cluster admins, but that kind of goes like in the way of cluster admin permission. So that's why they didn't go down that model.
Right.
One question, I have 2 questions. One is that it is mainly to prevent customers from scheduling pod to those nodes by mistake. It's mainly for mistake, or this is supposed to be some strong enforcement. And the second question is that cluster admin can work around the admission webhook, but they can probably also, I don't know whether they can access the Fargate node, but if they can SSH into it, they can also remove the handler, right? So what's the difference there?
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, so we will go over the first question. So the first question was whether to stop the pod to be landing on the Fargate node is the only concern, but that is one of the concern. Other concern is since we manage these nodes, we monitor, we do the recovery process on this node. So we do have like few of our process that are running, and we don't want customer to get access to those or see the logs for those as well. That's one. And second one is given that these worker nodes, they run on our side, like customer doesn't have SSH access to the nodes itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a question. So what happens after the webhook isn't there or whatever, fine. It gets to the node, it's rejected. It shouldn't be there. It should have been on this node pool, not this node pool, let's say. Now what? Like it's sitting there. It's up to the user to say, oh shit, the scheduler didn't do it right, and I ended up over here? Or were they supposed to have a node selector? Or I just worry. So I think this is kind of interesting. Like if you could imagine having a couple of different node pools with like kind of more severe sensitivity concerns maybe in one of the pools, and you don't want those workloads coming over here. This could be used to have like a second layer of isolation to ensure that, you know, between different node pools running the cluster. But my concern is, you know, what's the feedback path for the scheduler to see this and then go ahead and maybe do the right thing that it should have done in the first place. If they bypass the scheduler the first time, how do we handle now?
Right. Yeah. So that's a good point. So what we kind of do over here is like in this model, like we have two different schedulers on all our clusters. If you create a cluster in AWS, like you will see two schedulers running on your cluster. So one is called the Fargate scheduler, another one is the default scheduler. And Fargate scheduler, they act only on the pods which has the scheduler name set to Fargate. And the default scheduler, of course, doesn't act on them because the scheduler name is set to Fargate. So this issue happens when a customer, like when they explicitly like set the scheduler name to Fargate and then target one of the Fargate nodes. So the scheduler doesn't like come into like the impact picture here, but it's mostly like customers, they are playing with it and trying to get access to the Fargate nodes.
So
I think the descheduler can take a look at it as well, right?
So do you mind elaborating on it a little bit?
So I think this is going to be very helpful. I think I kind of ran into the very similar use case for this as well. Yeah. And I think it's probably in the previous slide where you mentioned the third case, which is the node managed resources, which could be criteria, node local validations. Yeah. Which could be something basically the scheduler or the admission hooks cannot do. And in our use cases, we may have cases where, you know, it depends on how each core is filled, how each NUMA node is filled. And these pods could be coming onto these nodes based on certain annotations you've added to it. And all of these things are just they're just totally transparent to the control plane. Right. And if we can customize it and, you know, have it be pluggable, and on the node level, we can choose to admit or reject and have either the scheduler or the descheduler watching over these rejections and act accordingly. I think that's just going to be very helpful.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Like we can have a custom scheduler or the descheduler outside of this that runs on the control plane side that takes action on the pods based on whatever kubelet decides.
I think, Yang, your case is quite different from what Shui's use cases here. What you are talking about, I agree. There's something is not transparent to the scheduler. One thing that was most of the criticized today's the scheduler is not the resource usage or wireless scheduling, right? So even like the VPA earlier we are discussing, and many things discussing like the so there are a lot of information is not represented at the scheduler level, cluster level. So scheduler sometimes not do the good placement. But what Shui's discussing here, use cases actually is quite different from the standard Kubernetes use cases here, I have to say. And this could be like, they basically want to using the node local pluggable pod, the admission controller to, what I should say? So this kind of could be rejected. So their scheduler is more like the receiver from the customer's request, and using this one but it's not really node. It's kind of what sounds to me is more like the virtual node, a fake node, and using this one to do another cluster level or maybe whatever node level, Fargate virtual node level admission. So it's different, but the problem is I want to share. This is most concern in the past SIG Node concern, it is because once we enable this kind of things, like Eric just asked the same question, so then you reject it. And the customer could be using this kind of things rejected and the cause of the ping pong situation. Because it's not, majority of our use cases is not Fargate use cases, right? So majority use cases for Kubernetes today, it is, there's the proper cluster level scheduler. Scheduler, it is pluggable for a given cluster. There's a bunch of the resource there, and it is kind of like it's not all virtual. This is a little bit, and so it's real compute resource and the storage resource and all those kind of the device resource, all those kind of resource there. And at the cluster level, they understand those resources. They do the really scheduling decision. So, and the node level of the admission will reject it because scheduler may don't know the real node state, but it should be real. We are trying to avoid the ping pong situation. We rejected something and then scheduler reschedule back and reject, and the job end up never being real run, like never always stuck at the pending state. I understand in Fargate's situation won't be such situation because your scheduler is just receiver about a job from the customer, random customer, I guess. And based on what you just mentioned here, so then you basically just admit, scheduler just admit, and then just try. And you want using pod admission controller decided, can my Fargate virtual node accept this one? Then you do another level of the scheduling to schedule to the real node behind the customer, since customer is nodeless situation or serverless situation. So
yeah. So Don, like quick question. So quick clarification on that. Like the Fargate worker node is actually a worker node, but the problem that we are having is that if customer bypasses the scheduler and directly assigns a pod to the node itself, if it does not go through the scheduler, but if they have their pod spec with the node name set directly, then it goes to the node and without going through the scheduler. So that was the problem that we had.
So based on my understanding, the Fargate nodes are actual node, but they are provided by AWS or EKS, and you don't want customer to have, I mean, some to run random pods there so that they get access to something within the node, or you don't want them to SSH into it as well. Basically, they can just schedule the limited set of pods running there, but no other things.
Yeah, you're right. Whatever you said is right.
Okay.
I had a quick question. I'm just wondering what happened because I know there was a cap for the static webhooks, basically for the API server, where you can register a static webhook so that it'll be registered upon when the Kube API server starts up, and that solves the issue of customers or like other folks basically being able to delete that webhook. Right. It seems like that would address this issue as well and would kind of follow the existing webhook pattern. So I'm just wondering what's the downside of kind of that approach? I believe there's a cap open for that currently.
Yeah, so that's true. So, and because of that cap is what, like, we closed the earlier cap for that we opened as well in the SIG node. And but then what I heard from Daniel like recently is that the SIG API missionary decided not to go down that path of adding a static webhook, because that kind of like prevents a cluster admin from with that introduces few problems for cluster admin permissions. So that's why I guess SIG API missionary decided not to go down that path, but I didn't dig deeper into why they didn't go down. But given that that particular cap is no longer valid, that's why like we wanted to like discuss about this pod admit handler again. And that kept whatever you said as open, like he was planning to close it, but I don't think he followed up on that. But I can check with Daniel on that. Daniel or Vivek, whoever is the author for that PR.
Got it.
Yeah. So I see a couple of raised hands. Eric?
No, I just don't know how to lower my hand. Sorry. Thanks.
Okay. So like as part of this KEP, like in the under the motivation section, we like I called out a bunch of other things that we evaluated as well. So what I would like is maybe like take a look at those as well, and then maybe in the next SIG Node meeting we can see if there are any other feasible approach, or if we wanted to go down this path, and then we can discuss about the interaction between kubelet and then these binaries and other stuff later.
Just a wild idea. Is it hard to do like a custom list watcher that the kubelet listens to, since you're configuring the node? Pretty much pass through for all purposes except the filtering action that it needs to take.
And you are saying like use this custom list watcher and then reject the pod?
Yeah, or mutate it if you want node to be the ultimate gate.
But yeah, but that kind of like makes it like a one-way door for us, because that doesn't provide extensibility for other users other than this AWS. Because what we are thinking is this might not be just like helpful just for Fargate worker node types, but it might also be helpful for other customers who wanted to restrict or who manages worker nodes, because behind customers.
It's potentially useful for anyone who runs kubelet on a multi-tenant environment.
Yeah.
So say, for example, if you're running Kubernetes nodes inside, VMs on shared infrastructure, where you can also mutate nodes outside of a Kubernetes control plane. I think we do something weird about that today, but I'm not sure exactly what.
Yeah, if you have some use case, or if you know about something, and if you can comment on the KEP, I can follow with you later as well, and then we can include that as well as part of this KEP.
Cool.
Cool, thank you. Does anyone have any other questions, or else like we can, so I was thinking we can discuss this next week, so give a week time or 2 weeks time for everybody to go over this, and feel free to add your suggestions or feedback. I can follow with you offline, and then we can bring it up in the next SIG meeting. Does that sound good?
Sorry, I'm just trying to find, is there like a link or a KEP or something like that to look at? I didn't see anything in the chat.
Okay, yeah. So there's a KEP. It's there in that SIG Node weekly meeting doc, but let me paste it in the.
Okay, if it's in the meeting minutes, then people should be able to find it.
Yeah, it is in the meeting link, and also slides. This slides also in his one of those PR.
Perfect.
Yeah, the link.
Thanks, Don. Cool. Yeah, that's it I have. Thanks, everyone.
So yeah, I think that's the good plan. So next, at least please reach out and for your use cases. I think the young use cases we know, and even I personally think about that's kind of a potential use cases, but the concern also is real for us. So that's why so please and with your use cases, so we can make that we can take consideration and how to make this is generic useful for everyone.
Yeah, makes sense. And so I was thinking about yarn use case as well, and I was thinking that we can actually extend whatever I was proposing for other use cases to perform some node level validations that yarn wanted to do.
Yeah, so it seems like that's well aware, but I just wanted to maybe add to that, which is, when I tried to do this in the past, I looked at the topology manager, which can do an emission, and the CPU manager, which also does an emission. And I was like, oh, in our case, we have something that's sort of like partially managed out of the core. So what if I can have a webhook to it, and I can, based on my logic, decide that'll just be super awesome.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Okay, thanks. And also, I think there's someone earlier, sorry, I forgot, I didn't remember your name, and mentioned multiple tendency use cases, please also, and make them more clear and raise into the KEP or PR there. Yeah. Okay, that's all for today. And any other topic not in the agenda you want to call out or get everyone's attention? Otherwise, we will call it off today. Okay, thanks everyone. And you got 5 minutes back. Thanks everyone.